with
Ugh.
someone. We had
Oh
to read.
gosh.
Yeah.
All right, all right. Well, happy Thursday, and welcome to the next series of the six elements of Shiftwell that we're talking about. I'm really excited to dive into this one. It's one of my favorite. It is about mindset, and of course, this whole series is really for us to look at performance from a holistic point of view. So, when it comes to performance, we're not just about our careers or what drives us. It's much more than that. It's about relationships we have. It's about our environment, and it's about mindset. So, but I'll pass it on to Jordana before we introduce our guest of honor for today. How do we define mindset?
Yeah, I have been looking forward to this talk for weeks, Elena, because one of the things I'm excited about is I'm starting to see a lot more attention, and I'm curious, Jevon, when we get in to the talk, how you see it too, around this concept. I think organizations in particular are starting to realize, whether it's growth mindset, resilience, mindset matters in driving results. So this is how we define it. Mindset is how you see yourself in the world and the world in good, bad, and in neutral time. So when we think about this as an element for performance, well-being, bringing out your best, we're talking about things like how hopeful you are, how much of a continuous learner you are, how resilient you are, how empowered you feel regardless of what's going on in the world. And it's your mindset towards yourself. It's your mindset towards others. It's your mindset towards organizations, and it's your mindset about the present state and the future. So we're going to dive deep, but yeah, let's let Jevon introduce himself, our guest of honor.
Oh man, I'm so excited for this one. I've been waiting all week, like you all said. So glad we're here today. So I'm Jevon Wooden, CEO and founder of Bright Mind Consulting Group, author of Own Your Kingdom: How to Control Your Mindset So You Control Your Destiny. So this topic is right up my wheelhouse. I'm all about helping people improve their performance. I'm just really, really excited to dive into this concept of mindset. It is so important, especially right now in the age of technology and uncertainty.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. So, Jevon, I've seen you personally in action, and I love the work that you do with leadership. And let's kind of kick off from the top, right? So, when it comes to leadership, there's a lot of talk about growth mindset and resilience, but what does it actually look like in action from your experience and what you have seen?
Yeah, I mean, the first step to all of what we're going to be talking about today is awareness.
Mm,
If you're unaware of what you're saying within your mind, you're unaware of how your triggers, your blind spots, and everything else, it's going to be very hard to externally convey what you may be looking to convey, right? And it's going to be very hard to understand things and be open to other perspectives. So for me, when you talk about resilience, a lot of people think that you have to necessarily go through bad things to become resilient. I don't necessarily agree with that notion. I believe that resilience comes from having the right perspective. Your perspective and your perception is your reality. So if you can kind of see things from a curiosity standpoint, if you can kind of be open to learning and lessons, and then one thing that we always talk about, in the mindset world is, tapping into that inner child. The inner child is willing to fall and get back up. The inner child does not let adversity stop them. They know that it is just a part of growth. As an adult, we kind of forget that, and we want everything to go well and go perfect. And I don't know how we got there, because when you plan something, how often does it actually go the way you had planned it in the first place? So we just have to be willing to kind of listen to what we're saying, the narrative we're telling, the story we're telling within our minds, so that we can kind of pause, place an interrupt between the thoughts, the subconscious and the conscious, so that we can respond instead of react.
Jevon, I love so much of what you said. Like you just hit on some of my favorite concepts and terms, and I could talk to you forever. That idea of the pause, and for my nerd or research oriented fans here, I'm just kind of going to bring in a little of the context of what Jevon's saying. So how Jevon describes that kind of growth oriented mindset. Many people are familiar with the term growth mindset, which was the research of Carol Dweck, which is really about being able to continue to move forward through mistakes, really being able, in that inner child way you mentioned, picking it up, moving forward, and keep going. And what you talked about with resilience in the terms of like your perspective and how you think, that really connects to a construct known as psychological flexibility. And psychological flexibility is what enables us to thrive. I love that you said it starts with awareness. because I think people really struggle with being aware of their own patterns, of their own triggers. So what are some things, thinking about leaders that they can do to begin to recognize and become aware of what those patterns are before the downward impacts to other people?
Yeah, I mean, it really starts with slowing yourself down. As leaders, naturally, innately, a lot of what we do may be reactive, like something happens and we have to try to problem solve solution. But my thing with leaders is a lot of leaders think that they have to be the ones to come up with the answer right then and there. And we need to slow it down a little bit. The saying measure twice, cut once is a good saying for a reason, because if you take time to really process and understand what are some of the consequences if I make this decision, what are some of the things that we may not be thinking about right now that may come up? How do we build in contingencies? What happens if it doesn't go according to plan? Are we able to take lessons? What is the risk here? So you have to really be able to ask yourselves and build in like pivot points of learning so that you don't feel so pressured to get it right on the first try. You don't feel pressured to have the right answer. And to be frank, a lot of people set goals, and it's like if you set a goal that stretches you, you can't really expect to hit it on the first shot. You can't. That is irrational thinking if you think about that, but it's emotional thinking. We want to perform at a high level, so we really have to be able to give ourselves that grace to say, hey, if this does not go well, what can I do? What's next? What are some of the risks? What is our risk tolerance? All those questions need to come in for a leader. And then the other component is understanding that you don't have to do things in a vacuum. Yes, you may be in a leadership role by title, but everyone has influence, as John Maxwell talks about. Everyone is a leader in some form, shape, or fashion. So lean in on other folks. Be willing to ask questions. Be willing to get that perspective. Be willing to ask, hey, here's my thoughts. What am I not seeing here? What am I not thinking about? So that you can kind of get a holistic viewpoint, not just from your lens.
There's two things I love that you just shared. One, you don't have to figure it out on your own. And in fact, sometimes getting outside perspectives and bringing in outside perspectives can help you see things that maybe are just such ingrained patterns that it's hard for you to notice them. And then the second piece, I love that. I think that's such a belief that we have around goals. We set these big goals and we kind of, whether it's subconscious or conscious, believe that when we set stretch goals, we have to hit them right away. And to the point that you bring up, even changing the statement in your head to saying, this is a stretch, which means I'm probably not going to hit it right away, which means it's going to take time, not only for yourself, but sharing that language with the team changes what you notice, changes what you come up with. Love that. Love that.
Absolutely. There's a saying in the Army, we say stay flexible. And the reason why we say that is because we understand that no matter how much training you put into it, how much planning, how many contingencies, like things rarely are going to go the way we thought they were going to go. And you have to understand that there's so many things that we can't control in uncertainty. So you have to be willing to just adjust as needed. So that's where that mindset piece is really, really important, especially from a leadership standpoint. Right now, if you look at the environment that we're in, like how many things can you actually say, oh, I control the way my company is going to go, the way my organization needs to shift? Not many. So when we forecast, we also have to put an asterisk next to that to say, hey, if everything, this is in a utopian world that we are going to do this thing. But if it doesn't go well, we're okay with doing these things, So I think that, if we went about it in that way and we allowed people to understand that it's okay to fail forward, then we would get a lot more productivity, and we'd have people who are willing to take more calculated risks to innovate.
As I'm listening to both of you, first, I feel like I'm getting a personalized coaching session. I think a lot of people who are listening to this probably feel the same way, because as you're speaking, I was like, oh my God, I really need to, et cetera. So, but what's interesting is that, Jevon, you mentioned that there's a lot going on right now. And I think there's a lot of fear up in the air, and you see this quite a bit. And part of that fear is the fear of the unknown. Sometimes it's like, with all the AI things going on, but as a leadership, like if somebody's listening to this and they're in an HR role or a leadership role in a company, and they're like, how do I spot that people are operating out of fear, like in my company, versus out of that growth mindset? And then the second part of that question is like, how do I then influence the change to start thinking more in that more abundant, more slightly optimistic mindset?
Yeah, there's a few things there. One, you should always be getting feedback, especially in the HR realm, talent development realm. You should have a way for people to kind of communicate with you almost near real time, where they can say anonymously or with their names on there to say, hey, here's what I'm experiencing right now, and do out of cycle. Don't wait about the end of the year surveys and climate changes and all this other stuff. Just do it so that they can, whenever they feel something, they can provide that feedback. They can write a note or whatever they need to do in a way that they feel comfortable. And that's why I mentioned that you need that way where they can do it anonymously as well. But hey, ask questions. What are you feeling today? We know it's a lot of time, a lot of things going on. In other organizations, you're seeing layoffs, or even in our organization. How are you feeling about those things? How do you recommend we go on about? What information would you need so you could feel psychologically safe here? Those are some of the questions I rarely see organizations asking. And I get it. Some leaders, they may be afraid to know the answer, but you can't be. You have to understand that, people are uncomfortable because of the uncertainty. Leaders going to have to be asking questions they normally may not want to be asking, or maybe that they need to ask their teams, like, what questions should we be asking if they're not well versed in that, because the people need to understand that their perspective and what they need and think and feel is valued, and that we don't just see you as a cog in the wheel to get our agenda completed. We see you as a part of where we're headed. And when you allow people to see themselves as a part of where you're headed, they understand how what they do ties into the greater goal. Now they can take ownership. A lot of what we see now, and I've been working with a lot of organizations on change management, is they're not allowing people to take ownership. They're not saying, hey, here's where we want to go. What would you want to do to help us get there? Here's how your part comes into play. Let me come down out of my executive office and talk to people one-on-one, not just in a town hall, but just, hey, I'm here for y'all. I'm going to sit with your team for a little bit. Let me talk to you. And then empowering the managers also to play a bigger factor in that. Because managers, if you think about it, they're getting it from both sides. They're getting sandwiched in between the uncertainty. So empowering managers to say, hey, how can I support you? I know this is a tough time for your team. I know that you're still trying to figure out what we're doing up here. So how can we support you so you don't burn out? So you feel psychologically safe. So you understand that, you're a part of this growth team. So those are some of the components that we really need to kind of bring more into the fold. Asking questions, allowing people to provide feedback and advice from their standpoint, letting everyone know from the analyst all the way up to whoever the top of the top is, how they play a part in a bigger role, telling people the why of what's going on. We miss that a lot as well. And then providing ownership, giving people an opportunity to be challenged and grow.
You just led a masterclass, Jevon, on how to lead people through change. I think that,
Thank you.
oftentimes, you are welcome. Oftentimes we think of change as like, what's the thing we're implementing? But change actually comes in the adoption, and adoption starts with mindset. And there are, a few things that I love that you just shared. One, helping people see their place in where you're headed. Not just in solving the problems or what's not working or fear, like switching from that future-oriented abundance growth area. It creates hope. It creates ownership, to the point that you brought up. And I also love that you talked about, like, don't wait for the big splashy once a year questionnaire. It's about asking good questions now. And you hit on a lot of things that we're doing, at Shiftwell, both in asking, kind of getting a sense real time, asking some of those questions. But any leader can ask a question. You have to be open, to the point that you brought up, of maybe hearing something that you don't want to hear. And I think it also comes back to being present, because, one of the things that I'd add on to what you shared is sometimes people's body language, people's tone, or even silence conveys things that might help you notice that there's maybe a challenge with the mindset, or the challenge in the way things have been delivered, that could be a warning sign. And I know that's harder in dispersed environments, but when we're not present, we don't notice those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Presence is key. And, speaking of that, a lot of organizations, we want to go in times like this. We want to focus on like training. Like, we need to train our people for change adoption or whatever it is. I'm like, you can't train. Training is going to be super ineffective if you don't first address the mindset, so that then the mindset can pour into the culture. And then you can train once the culture is correct. So I'm glad we're talking about mindset, because it is the foundation of everything. Anything that is successful at an organization starts at the individual level. If individuals are not performing optimally from a personal standpoint, it's going to be very hard to perform optimally from a professional standpoint. So we really need to really start finding out ways like Shiftwell to understand like where's the mindset of our people right now, and then how can we support them. So if they are in that fixed or scarcity mindset, how do we get them to the growth mindset that we're looking to do, because we need them. So I love that you just said that being present. Presence allows you to see some things that you would otherwise not see if you were just operating in a rapid growth rate.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing all of that. And I also love that you brought up that you called it the sandwich, the mayonnaise sandwich. I've never heard that before. I love it because you are getting squished, right?
You are getting squished, yes.
And that can be so hard, right? Managers feel like they have to protect the interests of the organization while also caring for and evolving the mindset of their team. And then there's kind of that bit of, well, what about me? So, what thoughts do you have both for leaders and kind of caring for their own mindsets, but also for any HR leaders or senior leaders from an organizational standpoint of what they could be doing to better support the mindset of their leaders, not just the frontline employees?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, we have to, I talk about a concept of 360 degrees of support. And what that looks like from my time in the Army, we have what you call sectors of fire and sectors of security. When we have an asset, we put it in the middle. You are the asset in this instance. You are ground zero, right? You need to allow and be able to tell people like, hey, here's how you can support me. Here's what I need. And then those people out on that first ring, they need to be able to know your baseline. They need to know how you typically operate so they know if you're off a little bit, because you may not see it. Sometimes we need a mirror to become self-aware, and that mirror is often other people who are close to us. So we need to be able to convey, and then we need to allow people the safety to say, hey, you're not right, or hey, it seems like you need support, seems like you need to take a break, whatever. And we need to often share that. The second thing is we need to be willing to do like wellness checks on our people. Wellness checks look like, hey, I know you've been busy. I know things have been working. Let me just lay eyes on you. Let's talk. You could do one-on-ones as at the manager level. We do a lot of one-on-ones. If I recommend they do that. They don't have to be long. It'll be literally 10, 15 minutes, not talking about the organization, not talking about work, but checking in on you. Like, hey, how's the family? How's things going? And one point, if you don't know if they have family, that's where you start. Start getting a little bit more personal, right? I can't stand when people say, hey, don't bring all that to work. Like we are people. We are humans. We need to start tapping more into humanity. Get off the messaging through Teams or Slack or whatever, and start having conversations with people. And another point to that is I see a lot of organizations doing RTOs, return to office initiatives. And my question to those organizations is always, what was the goal of that? Was it just because you felt like you wanted to see people? Because a lot of organizations are doing it, but there's really no why behind it. Like most of the people were very productive when they sat at home. So make sure you're not just taking initiatives that are going to affect the psyche of people just to say that you're doing it. So that's another thing. Like, ask people when you're about to do an initiative, what do you think? What are some of the things that you're struggling with right now in those? Or do you feel like, did you agree with the move that we made? If so, why? If not, why not? And so that way you can get a sense of where people are based on your movements. You're not trying to satisfy everyone. That's impossible. But what you're looking to do is kind of get a feel for where people are, where people are in their change adaptation, where people have fear of what just transpired. Do people see themselves with you in the long run from an organizational standpoint? You just really want to understand where they are, because once you do that, you kind of get into that mind of what we're talking about here, and you can adjust and provide through EAP or whatever, coaching or whatever you need to do. Then you could take those steps.
Having that goal, is so important to kind of shifting that mindset, going back to, again, what we're aiming for. And even in the nature of the questions that you just asked, I just heard the why. The why is getting the pulse check of where we are. So, and I think probably one of the things that puts leaders in a mindset of fear is they mistakenly believe that if I ask these questions, somebody else is going to assume that I'm going to act on whatever they give me. And it's because they're not setting that why or intention for themselves and then setting that context up front. So even saying, hey, these wellness checks are something that we're going to be doing, for 5 minutes once a month, because there's a lot going on in the world right now. And I just want to get a sense of where you are. I might not be able to solve for them, but this helps me to kind of gather some of those insights that can help me, help you, help the org, etc.
Absolutely. I was just working with a construction company on exactly what we're talking about here. I don't know how many people know, but the construction industry has one of the highest rates of suicide in any industry. And then they have the highest substance abuse rate of any industry. The reason why was they're not used to doing things like this. They're not used to taking those times to check in on their people or send out, hey, how are you doing? How's your energy levels? How's this? And there's innately uncertainty built in, because one minute someone could be having work, they could be building a home, whatever. Next day they may not have. They may say, hey, don't report. We don't have anything for you. So that we have to really consider, like, based on what industries we in, what are the tendencies of that industry? What are some of the cyclical things that take place? And if you learn that from an HR standpoint, you're already ahead of the game, because now you can build programming around those tendencies. Is there seasonality where some people, we see an uptick in people calling in or taking PTO? Right? Start working on programming around that. Don't just do it in a vacuum and say, hey, this is what I learned in my certification or my training. But what am I seeing? You got to use those human insights. When we're talking about mindset and all that right now, you got to use the human insights and what you learn and pay attention to that. I think that again, that presence is going to be very important as we look to get people back on the other side of feeling that psychological safety again.
As you guys are speaking, I keep coming back to the story in my head. This was maybe 8-10 years ago at this point, and it just stuck with me. And I'm just wondering what this person's thinking today about all this. So about 8 years ago, I was talking to a leader, CEO of a company, and I just finished reading Simon Sinek's book, and it was all about, like, empathetic leadership and all these things. And I was just sharing with him. I was like, what are your thoughts on it? He said, well, if you care about your people to that point, you don't know business. Basically, what he, like, literally, that was his statement. That person, like, Simon Sinek was still kind of coming out in this world at that time, and so he wasn't very familiar with his work. And he said, if that's what they're going with, is like being empathetic and caring about wellness of your people, you don't know business. And we have obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here, but also there's facts and research and data to back up that when we take care of our people, ultimately everybody benefits, the business, including the business. So it's just wild to me that, I'm sure there's still those mindset out there, but that keeps coming back, and I'm dying to know what this person's thinking about now. He probably doesn't have a company, actually. I should look it up. Probably scared away all his people, but it's just good for business. Like, that's one of the things I always come back to. Like, yes, we, even if for the critics of us, taking care of your people is just good for business.
Yeah, if you think about how oxymoronic that is to say you don't know business but you take care of your people, who's getting you the results? Right?
Exactly.
Who is getting you the results? And if you look at, like you said, historically, if you look at the performance of organizations who are seen by their people as being empathetic, you can look at EY, any of those top consulting firms will show you, even like Psychology Today, right? They've done research on these things. So if you look at it from the actual research back, scientifically back perspective and standpoint, you will see that organizations that are empathetic or emotionally intelligent perform leaps and bounds better, even on the profit aspect, the bottom line. So, when people say that, I always wonder, like, what's transpired in their lives to get them to believe that. What happened? And that's the emotional intelligence in me. I'm curious to know, how they wound up at that resolution that, if you take care of your people, you're soft or you're wrong. But that's what we're talking about here today. That's the mindset piece, because that's a scarcity mindset view. That's a fixed mindset view. But the good thing for the listeners is, if you're one of those people, you can change it.
Yeah,
right? That's what we're talking about here today. Like, we have the power to change in mindset, and everything else that we do is a practice. You're not always going to get everything right. And sometimes you need to be enlightened on some things. And most of that enlightenment, again, comes from being willing to be aware and then being willing to decide differently. If you are someone who feels like your way is the only way, or what you think is the only thing is right, Pay attention to that and then find out why. Is that my voice telling me that I have to be right all the time? Or did that come from somewhere? We have to be willing to ask ourselves questions first and really get deep and introspect on the answer before we can even think about leading someone else.
And I think like that's the crux of what mindset, like what you're describing. What is our mindset? It's the stories and it's the beliefs that we carry that we convince ourselves are truth. And I think there's a difference between saying this is a truth versus this is the truth. And to your point, to be able to identify what is it that I'm saying, where is that actually coming from? And then what might be some other truths that I might not be aware of. And sometimes multiple truths can happen at once. So, maybe in this case, caring for people to an overly big extent caused some challenges because it wasn't done in the right way. But there's also truth that shows when it is done in the right way, it can actually drive business results. And in fact, more data backs that up. It all comes down to the stories that we're telling us and how we rewire those stories.
Yeah, well, the story. Well, everything we talked about here today is the story. What story are you telling yourself? And then what story are you conveying to others? And it's doubly important in HR. HR, I know when I was in corporate, we didn't want to talk to HR. So what is that telling you about the mindset of people when it comes to HR? So as HR professionals, as talent development professionals, whatever the people side of the house, we have to get back to connecting to the people. And I feel that with all that we're hearing right now, we're actually going away from that. We talk about AI and technology and all that, but I'm not even referring to that. I'm just referring to people being afraid to connect deeper. People being afraid to understand, like, why are you at this company? Why have you been here for 5 years? Do you have 3 kids? What, how do you operate like this? Why do you keep getting up day to day and giving your best? Those questions are really going unanswered. And for me, that's where, HR talent and all that can win, is by taking the time to relearn all of that, or learn it if you had it in the first place, giving people a chance to evangelize your organization, why they stayed here for 20 years. Like, those are quick wins, and those are what's going to allow people who are at whatever level, they're going to start evangelizing you in among other folks. And that's how organizations are going to win today. User-generated content. And the best users are the people who work for you. They're the employees who get up every day and show up every day and get you those results that we're looking for.
That is super, super practical. As we kind of wrap up this conversation, I actually want to ask both of you a question. And we'll start with you, Jevon. What is like one thing or maybe 2 things you do in your day-to-day to maintain your mindset?
First thing is gratitude. So I'm someone who has clinically diagnosed depression. So I have to make sure that every day I wake up, before I do anything else, before I move, I practice gratitude for myself, just to say, hey, Jevon, I'm proud of you for getting up today. I'm proud of you for, going to take a shower, going to work out, whatever it is. It could be small, but that puts me in the mindset of, hey, I'm thankful that I'm still moving forward. And progress, when you see progress is possible, it just makes it a little more easy to put one foot in front of the other, no matter what adversity you're facing. And then the other thing that I like to do is I like to take tech disconnects. So I'll go for a walk or something like that for at least 15 minutes, midday. Not just in the morning, but midday, I'll take that walk and just disconnect so I can process, allow myself to kind of just down cycle a little bit and just be. I feel like, a lot of us feel like we got to always be on. That time allows you to reset, and it also can segment your day. And I just plan it on my calendar. I have a very important meeting with a very important person, and that's me, because I need to be operating optimally if I am to achieve everything I set out to do.
What about you, Jordana?
Oh my gosh, I love that meeting with yourself. That's something that anyone could put on their calendar. I love that so much. So a couple things, like for me, it's about curiosity rather than judgment. So when I catch myself, maybe getting in a doom loop, I kind of pause it instead of getting upset with myself for being in that doom loop. Why is that there? What is it actually trying to help me or teach me? And in that moment, how can I approach it from my own thought, a lens of empathy, and take, the learning, or thank you for trying to help me with that, but this isn't actually helping me right now. those I coach know I will ask questions. That's a story. What's another story? So I'll try and do that with myself too, to see where I'm making assumptions. And then I try to get present in moments of joy. So things that kind of really ground me in the present state and get me out of, any spirals or maladaptive thinking. So my dog, and sometimes she'll choose to do it. I swear that girl can feel my energy. There's a video of her literally closing my laptop lid because she was like, "You're getting too stressed out about work." So like just seeing the world through her eyes, playing music, reading, those are things that really get me focused, present, and out of things that might be shifting my mindset. How about you, Elena? What do you got?
Well, gratitude is a big one for me, but I won't repeat that one. But I'll add a couple of others. One, I think for me, being around like the environment piece, being around people that keep me grounded and like keep me thinking in this like a more optimistic way, and you too being a big part of that circle. So I'm grateful to you. And the other one, which might not be as obvious to a lot of people, but it's sleep. Quality sleep, because when I don't get quality sleep, everything just seems darker the next day.
Yeah,
and that really messes with my mindset.
Yeah, I love what you're hitting on, Elena, and I think Jevon, you have too, through the relationships and the empathy. Like these are not things in isolation; they blend together. So while we're kind of talking about each of these elements as their own thing, it is the blend of it. Elena, I just heard how important health is to you. Jevon, it's clear relationships are important to you in everything that we've talked about. As is an environment that allows for a little bit of playfulness. Like I'm hearing that come out in you too. So there is a morphing of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all goes to what we talked about today with that mindset piece, allowing yourself that gratitude and that space and time to just do what you need to do to tap in and love yourself a little more.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you guys so much for being here, for sharing these insights with our audience. For our audience, I encourage you to just think about one thing you can take away and apply in your own life and work from this conversation. And stay tuned for our next Shiftwell element. I think it's on environment coming up. So stay tuned and follow the page and give Jevon a shout out once you watch this, and connect with him on LinkedIn as well. I'll put it in the show notes after this recording is done. And thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you both.